Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, well, as I mentioned, the session is how to get the most. As we mentioned multiple times, we are support engineers. We saw the bad things and the good things of the product. So the idea is to share with you the real experience with customers. Every day we are working on multiple cases with multiple situations, and I will like, or we will like to share with you how to get the most, or what is the main things of the product to, let's say, to have more and pay less to Microsoft. No, so about us, well, you know, my name is Manuel Jurado. I'm a escalation engineer working for more than 12 years in Microsoft and a speaker in multiple events. And with me, it's Sabrin. Sabrin, if you could introduce yourself.
Good day, everyone. I am part of the Azure SQL support team, and I have been almost working for 3 years with Microsoft, and as overall as a support engineer, almost for 8 years.
So as we mentioned, what is the goal in this presentation? Well, is I think that Sabrin, we determined that the 4 main groups or topics, no, Sabrin, that we used to have in our cases, right? About performance, no, is very important because we know that we have many cases also people that ask about, hey, I would like to pay less for this database tier. What is the option that we have? For example, monitoring, no, Sabrin, that you are going to talk something about it, no?
Yeah.
And disaster recovery, it's another good topic about how it's possible to implement these such of things, and we are going to share with you several things, several ways to find the best approach, and also the cost. We think that even we are not support engineers from billing concept, but we would like to share with you several things that we found in order to reduce the cost. Okay, so for the reason, this is our 4 groups that we have.
Yes, and also something you will notice during this presentation, me and Jose will be asking each other questions, and these are actually from the, let's say, regular questions and inquiries that we get from our customers and working with them daily on the cases. So during the presentation, you will notice that both of us will ask each other, and this is, let's say, coming from our experience working with our customers.
Okay, let's start with performance. Yeah.
So in terms of performance, Jose, usually our customers would like to say to understand further, because we all know, like with Azure SQL, you have the machine learning, you have the AI. So basically we get some, let's say, main inquiries that how can I use these machine learnings, the AI tools, in order to have more options to give me, for example, like recommendations, to provide me, let's say, some ways to enhance the performance. Some of the questions were like if we can have like an automatic way in order to improve the database performance. Also, for example, if I have like highly loaded database, can I offload the select statement if I'm using specific service tier? For example, in the screen, you can see some of the common questions. So if we can check also this, Jose.
Yes. So, well, in terms of performance recommendations, basically 2 things that is very important in terms of storage, because we used to have several questions about the storage. So remember that when you choose the database tier, let's say premium or business critical or general purpose or standard, the latency in terms of storage is different. It's much, let's say, we have less latency with business critical and premium that we have in general purpose. That's mean that we cannot use general purpose. No, basically is depending on the workload that we have. Okay, so say this, one thing that we used to have many situations is our customer is working with the application normally without any issue, and after 6 months, 7 months, they create a case to us, mention that, hey, everything is running very slow. We don't know what happened. So, and we provide to them, hey, you need to create these indexes. Okay. Uh, uh, in this part, we would like to share with you one specific things that we have about the performance recommendations that we have in Azure SQL DB. As you can see in the screen, right now, when you enable this option, automatically SQL Server is going to, let's say, analyze the workload that you have. And after 24 hours, more or less, or 36 hours, their SQL Server is going to propose the creation of several indexes based on the workload. So if when we have this, you are going to have one thing that is called, hey, you need to create these indexes. So one thing that's very important is, okay, I could create this index, but what happens if I'm not able to reach my expectations about the improvement? Well, SQL Server, SQL Azure in this part, after, let's say, another 4 or 5 days, if the improvement is not that this machine learning process has not reached this number, is going to revert back the operation, right? So at the end, that means that we could have an option that you could enable and create these indexes. It's possible that SQL Azure create automatically this index, of course. So you could define in the portal, say, hey, create this index when we have the less workload in my database in order to not affect in your business. Okay, or you could disable this option and basically receive the recommendations and apply this recommendation. For example, when you have any Windows maintenance, Windows maintains in order to, let's say, to create these indexes. So what is the option that we have in this automatic tuning? Well, as we mentioned, you have 3 options: create indexes, drop indexes, and force the last good plan. Okay, what does mean create indexes? Well, as we mentioned, we detect that after several workload, we need to create this index. Automatically, SQL is going to create this one, and drop means the following. So if you have an index, but you are not using this index, and the end, you know what is the impact to have an index. Every insert, update, and delete, we need to, SQL Server needs to update the data. Okay, they need to update the indexes. So we are going to reduce a little bit the performance or the impact that you have in this, the performance in terms of storage. So I'm going to share with you several examples that we have. Okay, but basically this is an example. What does mean after one process that the recommendation that we have, not is the different table, the reasons, and also about if this index is duplicated or not, because you know that sometimes, or the developers, the DBA, create duplicate indexes. For example, create an index for column 1 and column 2, another one create a column 2 and column 1. So also this machine learning process is going to detect this one and inform to you that, hey, review this or automatically drop the indexes. And also we have several errors detection in terms of all errors. So I'm going to share my desktop with you that I would like to share several examples about it. Well, so right now, in order to, one second is here. Yeah. In order to give an example how works this process, basically I create this table. Basically, as we could see, is one typical table with first name, second name, etc. I add a specific amount of data. I think that right now we have 26 million of rows, but the idea is to create random data using several combinations in order to have random data for first name, second name, and also for age. We are going to have one value between 1 and 100. So you could see what is the details of this table. This is the table that we have right now with the amount of data, etc. And also, we are going to, the idea is during one day, we create this store procedural that basically we run multiple process, reading multiple data, or using multiple combination of these three columns. Running, for example, filtering by age, using first name, using second name, combine both these sorts of things. Also, as the table is 26 million of rows, we need to, the idea is to also to instruct to use just only one vCore in this part, etc. So running this process using our stress, here. Right now, this application was working around one day running this process. So we could see what is the results that we have right now. What is the situation? We have 75 connections right now. As we have in the OS stress, we are running 75 process at the same time. We have the main weight stats because I'm working from home today. You could see the async IO is because I'm sending data to the database. And we are going to start sending several informations about beside the indexes is, as you could see, we have one specific DMV that it's called right now resource stats. Well, basically resource stats is going to provide us what is the situation in my database. Right now, running 75 workers, we are reaching the 99% of the database. We are reaching the maximum 73 workers. Okay, we have the data also. If we run the resource governance in this database, we could see also what is the capacity of my database, because most probably you notice that SQL Server or SQL Azure in this part is using resource governor in order to limitate the number of vCores. When you choose the number of vCores that you are using right now, I have the limit in 2 CPUs, the maximum memory, the maximum sessions, memory grant, etc. Also, other part that is very important using this DMV is about the historical data of the resource pools. Okay, so right now the resource pool that is called SLO Sharp Pool 1 is the resource the Sharp pool, the pool that is going to use my database, because we have other ones, let's say, to run the backups, to obtain data from the internet data, etc. You could see what happened or what is the information that we have about all the topics, about the memory that is using, the IO that we are using, etc., time to time. Not, and finally, other option that we have is the typical DMV that you could use in your on-premise environment about what's happening internally, about the different process. For example, here, as we are using a business critical database, and we are going to use rate scale, right now, when I reading data or inserting data, I saw that the communications that we have between the primary with the secondaries. So after this process, I'm going to the portal, this part, as we have several things about intelligent performance. The first thing is we could see what happened in terms of CPU, performance, etc. Of course, that we could go to the portal in the overview, go to the monitoring, and we could choose every information that we could have in terms of CPU, I/O, log, workers percentage, if we are reaching the 100% or not, etc. And also we could see what happened 7 days ago about in this database. So the most important thing is in terms of intelligent performance, it's about the performance recommendation. After this process, SQL Server detects that I need to create 2 indexes. The first index is to include this index, that the script that I have is to include second name, or is to sort the data by second name, age, and first name. Also, I saw that SQL Azure suggests to create another index about age, first name, and second name. So right now, SQL Server, after we run this process, SQL Azure detect and inform the suggestion. We have 2 status here. We have validating and success. What does mean success? Success means that we have different states here. We have preparing, in progress, and success. Success means that they, after they analyze the workload, they suggest this index and they create automatically this index in my database. Why? Because I have here in automatic tuning, I have the option to specify to create the indexes, okay, or to drop the indexes automatically, okay, without any intervention from my side. Of course, that if we mark off, we are going to have the same recommendation, but in this case, Azure SQL DB is not going to do anything, okay, just only to provide information to you, the recommendation about it. What does mean validating? Validating means that SQL Server has been created this index, or is waiting or is checking that this performance, this improvement, for example, is going to take effect. Okay, because if they don't have this effect, SQL Server, SQL Azure is going to revert back this index. Okay, right now it's checking that in the workload, in the overload workload, is taking this information. Okay, of course that we could go to the query inside to obtain more data. Also, we could see other things about the query that we are running. For example, as you could see, this is the main cause. What was the reason that we create this index, etc. So for us, it's right now it's a very good thing to have this scenario with us, because automatically it's going to create this index for us. So I don't know if you have any question about this specific topic.
I have one, Jose. In case I need to see this recommendation, minimum I will need to wait for 24 hours, correct?
Yes, right. Yes, because at the end, you know that we have the DMVs, the misindexes details, right? But in this part, the add value that we are adding here is to check if it's needed or not, okay? Because we could have a spike, and basically, because for several processes that you are running, but if continuously you need to have this index, of course, that we are going to suggest the creation of this index.
Perfect.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question, because in the end, it's important for us. Of course, but after it, we are going to provide you more information. Of course, that we could use the query store that we are going to explain later about several details about it. But the most important thing is right now, if I go to my database and also the tables, let me stop, because most probably is using 100% of the CPU. I'm not able to do anything. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Right now, if I expand the indexes, right now SQL Server create these 2 indexes. One is the validate the index that was created. Another index is it's validating right now that if the improvement is the improvement is the expected value that they have in this recommendation, SQL Azure is going to maintain this index. If not, as we mentioned, is going to let's say to revert back and delete the index when we don't have any workload. Okay, so that's it in the part that we have in terms of this part. So please, Sabrin, could you please share your desktop again?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And next,
I think that we have a question from Mark, right? I think that we saw. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. On the portal page where it shows the recommended indexes for creation,
yeah,
it gives a count of the queries that it would help, but it doesn't give us a query hash or anything we can use to track that down so that we can validate for ourselves. Maybe there's a better index. Maybe we want to take this opportunity to refactor that query if we see something dumb in there. And it's not showing us that.
It's a very good question, Mark. You're right, but at the end, this is the magic that we have behind the scenes in terms of SQL, because in this part, when we have this scenario, we don't have, but this application, this artificial intelligence, is checking this number, because when we create the indexes, of course, that we need to know how many times we need this index, right? I don't know, to be honest with you, if we have any DMV that we could see more details. I remember.
We do not actually. I have to go into Custo and get that information. I can find it, but it's tricky.
Yes, it's tricky. No, it's a very good feedback in this part. I don't know I don't know right now if.
See, if the portal can give us the count of the affected
it will be
queries,
great. Yes,
it must know what those queries are, and it would be nice if it shared that data in the portal.
Yes, you're totally right in this part. Let me check if we have. No, it seems. No, it seems that we don't have. I don't know in terms of standing recommendation.
They could stuff it in there.
Yeah. Yes.
In the details, but they don't.
Yes, perfect. No, thank you so much. I think that we have one web page that you could provide this information, this feedback in this part. It's really it's a good feedback in this part, because as you mentioned right now, let me try to find the feedback URL that we have, because most probably it's a good idea, because they mentioned that we have the query, but not how many times that we need this one, right? So yeah, yes, perhaps how much time we need, no? Like we have in missing index detail. Yes, you're totally right in this part, Mark. Thank you so much for this feedback.
Oh, the other thing is, if you have it automatically creating an index, you need to take into account the fact that it pays no attention to what other indexes may already exist on the table. So if it's suggesting an index on column 1 and column 2, you may already have an index on column 1. And so it's creating an overlapping index. So you've got to go and manually go clean that up and get rid of your old index, because now you have a better one, and you sure don't want to be maintaining both.
Yes, I didn't see this behavior before, okay, in multiple cases. I don't know if you experienced this situation about column 1 and column 2, but as when we have this scenario, if one index is not using anymore, automatically SQL Server is going to decide drop the index. Okay.
But it'll only drop an index that it created.
Yes, but as I mentioned, Mark, I didn't see, let me check, because I didn't see if they are going to create, because let me explain one thing, because when I ran this process, you could see how many indexes, no, SQL Server, SQL Azure could decide to use, no. For example, for me, if with 26, as I mentioned, this table has data driven. Yeah. Let me stop the process.
Well, my point is just that if you manually create an index,
Yeah,
it's never going to automatically drop it,
uh,
because it makes the smart decision that you probably knew what you were doing, and there must have been a
yes,
reason why you did it. So it can create duplicate indexes, or I should say, overlapping indexes.
yes.
If you've got an index with 2 keys and 3 include columns, and it finds that you're still getting key lookups, and it would be better if you added a couple of more include columns, it will automatically create that better index, but you're still left with the old one.
Yes, let me explain other thing. Mark, you're right. Just only, as I mentioned, we have 28 million of rows, right? You could see how many indexes that SQL Server is going to create. For me, if I need to create this one, I'm going to create one for first name, another one for second name, another one for age, etc. Even if I go to the query data store right now, and I saw, let's say, in the query web statistics, let's say one example. Give me just only, let's say, 2 weeks. When I click, for example, in terms of CPU, if I click here, this query, first name, okay, SQL Server say, hey, you need to create this index, okay, but the question that is SQL Server based on these sorts of things, if I need to create another one for the second first name, like, or let me choose another one. I don't know. Sorry. No, first name. No. Another one. Age with, I don't know. Come on. Yes, this one. So I'm going to create multiple indexes, as you can see here, right? So,
Yes.
but one thing that I saw, Mark, was very funny, because I was discussing yesterday during the preparation of the presentation, the final presentation, is this project just only report to create 2. One based on the second name, age, and first name. Another one also about age and first name and second name. So as I mentioned, Mark, I didn't have the opportunity to test when we have an existing indexes, because I know that SQL Server, we have an DMV that in the indexes, we have the option to determine if this index has been created automatically or not. If I run sysindexes here, I don't know if sysindexes, yes. We have one column somewhere that I don't know, I don't remember right now, that if this index has been created by us or by the tool, okay? So for the reason, right now, I don't have right now the experience that this tool suggests to create one index when it's involved another column, like you mentioned, now call 1, another index, call 1 and call 2. I don't have this experience, but just only I need to test, create an index and wait, I don't know, one or two, one day in order to find. But it's a very good point in this part. in this part. Yes, Mark. It's a very good point in this part.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you so much. I'm going to find the URL because it's very important that for the DVAs, for the reason, also, Mark, when we have multiple conversations about if the DVA is going to disappear or not, okay? These tools, at the end, is not a tool that is going to replace the work of a DVA. Because in Azure or in other cloud company, we have a different profile of customers, okay, of type of customers. We have startups that they don't have a DVA. We have another companies with a DVAs, another big companies with a DVAs team that is managing everything about it. So this tool is, let's say, it's to give some insights, okay, to the DVAs, okay. That's not mean that you need to create or not, okay. It's just only, hey, I found this, do the workload, okay, because as you mentioned, using the missing indexes, and the end is every time that when we run the statistics, when every time that we have a failover or we have a reconfiguration, etc., we are going to miss this data. Not for the reason is a recommendation for other companies that we have that is startups that they want just only apply the maximum effort for their business, okay, without taking care about the DVAs. The indexes, etc., is the best choice for them. For the DVAs, of course, you could disable this option in terms of to do this automatically and check if the index is needed or not. It's for the reason we have different types of customer that we could use this or not. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I find that the recommendations are incredibly helpful. Between Query Store and having this automatic tuning overlaid on it, it's great. I won't let it automatically create indexes any more than I would let DTA do it or go solely by missing index recommendations in the DMVs for that. But it's a really good clue as to where you should start. And if a company doesn't have a DBA at all, this is a lifesaver.
Yes, this is the point, because also we are going to talk later, but about the statistics. No, you can only imagine the number of questions that we have. Hey, we need to update the statistics. We say yes, so you need to update the statistics. So you can only imagine how many cases that we have in terms of performance that the first recommendation is to update the statistic with full scan. Okay, so for the reason it's important that to give some insights about it. Okay, for the reason, as I mentioned, we have different customers, different types, so we need to use this tool depending on of the needs that we have, right? Thank you so much, Mark. So,
thank you.
Sabrin,
Let me share it again. And basically, my next question would be, or let's say the next common question that we will get is there is a way, if I notice like high, let's say usage on my database, is there is a way that I can use a replica in order to overrule the select statements to benefit from specific service tier if I'm using it?
Yes, and the end, when you choose the premium databases or business critical databases, internally the high ability that we have is to use always on. So for the reason you could see in this image that we are going to have 2 replicas of your database. Basically, if you want to use this one, as always, using the application intent equal only in the connection string, you are going to point to the replica or not. Okay, what does mean with a general purpose of a standard? Well, the high ability that we have right now is the storage. So we have 3 copies of the data in terms of high ability. Okay, but that means that we could not have this rate scale. Well, in general purpose and standard, no, but you could use active geo replications or also in both situations, we could use file library groups. But I would like to give one example because it's a very common question. What happened, or what is the latency that we have between the primary and the secondary, right? You know that in rate scale, that means that we have a sync georeplication. So that means that the primary needs to receive the acknowledge from the secondary that this transaction has been done in the secondary. But we used to have questions about the latency. Well, this is an example. It's not the real scenario, okay? But I would like to share with you, Sabrin, one simple thing. As you can see, we have two power cells here. In the left side, we have a power cell that is called write data, that basically is going to insert one row per time, okay? And running this process using the table that we have about to know what is the replica using CSDN databases replica status, we could see, for example, how is the replication, how works the replication, what is the latency that we have. And in another side, in the right side, we have rate data. It's the same, more or less the same PowerShell script that basically the idea that every 1 second, we are going to run the similar query and to obtain the data that report this DMV. For example, is the primary or not? The state is healthy or not, or synchronized or synchronizing? The last log sequential number that we received, the last time that was committed, how much is the redone, how much is the queue, etc. So I'm going to run this small script. As you can see here, we have the interaction, right? We have the last time that we insert the data. We have how much is the interaction, if it's synchronized or not, is healthy, online, and we could see multiple information about the sequential number. For me, it's important to pay attention, let's say, about the load redo queue size and the load redo rate, because more or less is the kilobytes in the log in terms of kilobyte that the primary is sending to the secondary. So I'm going to run in the primary, and for example, 1 second, it's going to increase a little bit this. And this is, for example, the information that we saw right now. I don't know what happened in this scenario, but okay. So the number of counts, the number of rows that we have is 99. You could see that it's very fast. We are not losing too much millisecond in terms of the transmission of the data. We saw that false means that is the secondary, the true is the primary, and we could see all the data. And right now, as we are inserting just only one row, more or less the log is 8 kilobytes. I would like to stop this one and run, for example, another script. And I'm going to run, for example, the same. I'm going to run, for example, 100 operations and insert the row in this table. So right now, when we have this, we are going to start seeing the redo is not too much, but if I review what happened internally with SQL Server, is here. Second. Yeah. Second is Okay. Right now we have 100 connections, but you could see what happened right now. Right now, much probably you are familiar with this wait type that is sync commit. That means that right now the almost wait type. Let me run again. We have more information, more updated information. Right now we have around 33 of these 100 connection that is taking more or less 7 milliseconds to receive the commit for the replica. We have the CPU. Right now we have an increment in terms of the log. And here, for example, if we have something, yes, for example, we could see in this part is how much time is taking right now this commit. So right now, running this process is taking, as you could see, 2 milliseconds, 11 milliseconds, 12 milliseconds every time that I run one row. But one thing that we saw working with developers, that sometimes it's much better to run this process in a batches more than single transaction, because if you have a huge number of single transaction, you are going to increase more, let's say, the subsystem in terms of log manager. So what is the idea? Right now, you could see this one. So my idea is to reduce this wait type. Basically is changing. Second. Is changing this one, but instead to insert, for example, 100, one row, basically the idea is to run, for example, 10,000 rows. Okay, so when I run this one, I'm going to improve a lot the transaction, because in just only one single packet, let's say, we are going to send more data. And most probably, we are going, I don't know when, but we are going to see here more data in terms of what is the queue size that we have for the replica. So for the reason is other things that we used to suggest is when you run this type of process, think about the batches, okay, more than single transaction, in order to improve more the performance when you are, let's say, bulking cell, because we saw several situations many times in support, right? Also, if I go back to the weighted statistics, most probably I'm not going to see more about a hard commit transaction, and I'm going to see the typical things that we have, payloads, POLADs, etc., and improving more the data. We could see that we reduce the number of CPU, we increase the transaction and the transaction log. So it's for the reason, of course, that the rate scale is a very good option in order to use Power BI, other tools for reading data, no? But the most important thing that we would like to mention is when you have rate scale beside this one is the latency is very low. And if you run these batches, you are going to increase more than that. The information will be more quickly transmitted to the secondary. Okay, so I don't know if we have any questions from about this topic. I don't know. Sorry, I don't see right now.
Currently, we don't have anything in the
Okay.
chat window.
Perfect.
Then let me
Yeah.
move next. I will share my screen. And since Jose, we were speaking about indexes and statistics, one of the things that we need to make sure that we consider is the job automation part, especially when it comes to the indexes and statistics. We have been seeing a couple, multiple cases where we had like a performance issue, and it was mainly due to the fact that we don't have a job that is updating the statistics as well as maintaining the indexes. I would like to represent to you some of the options that we have in order to automate a job, and what tool to use depends more on the resource type that you are using as well as on your environment. Basically, we have three solutions that you can use in order to automate a job. You can use Azure Automation, you can use Elastic Jobs, and you can use SQL Agent. Let me start first with the Azure Automation part. This is currently supported for Azure SQL Database and Managed Instance. So if you have any kind of these resources, you will be able to use it. And basically, the automation accounts will be using runbooks that can be written either using PowerShell or using Python code in order to automate the job. Let me show you on my portal side. So as mentioned, the automation account is a resource that is provided by Azure, and you can easily create it. The creation of it is a very straightforward part. You can select the subscription, the resource groups, and etc. Once you
Sabrin,
have
sorry, I have a question. So that's mean that I don't have SQL Agent in SQL Azure, for example.
Now in Azure SQL Database, if you connect to it, you will notice that you don't have the SQL agent. That's why sometimes in the Azure SQL Database, we need to consider to have alternative because it's currently not available for the Azure SQL Database. If you are using Managed Instance, it's available. So you can consider using the Azure Automation, especially if you have an Azure SQL Database.
Okay, thank you.
But as a supportability, you can also use it for a managed instance. So for example, if you have like a mixed environment between SQL database and managed instance and you want to configure everything in one place, you can consider the automation accounts. Let me show you an example of an automation account that I have previously created. And basically, once you create an automation account, you will have a runbox section. In this section, you will have all the jobs that you will be configuring either using PowerShell or Python. By the way, even if it's using PowerShell, you can, if there's like specific T-SQL you would like to configure it, you can pass it through PowerShell using the SQL invoke. For example, since we were speaking earlier, Jose, regarding indexes, on my database here, for example, in this specific one, I have a store procedure that is responsible about rebuilding the indexes as well as updating the statistics. I would like to configure like a weekly job to run this store procedure rather than me going manually and execute it. In this part, I have this example, for example, for a runbook. And once I access it, if I check the code for it, it's basically a PowerShell script that is using the database credentials, and I will show you later how you can store the credentials. And as you can see here, all I'm using is the invoke SQL command in order to pass the command to execute this specific store procedure. So by doing this, I can test the PowerShell script, make sure it's all good. Once it's verified, I can publish it. And once it's ready, I can either start it manually or I can start doing a schedule for it. The schedule can be as you want. It can be weekly, as it can be monthly. This is all depends on the workload that you have. The process of adding a schedule is very straightforward. You just need to assign which specific time zone you would like to follow, and you can do the recursive for it. Like for example, like I would like to do it weekly. For example, let's say I want to do it during the weekend days since we don't have much workload. So you can set it, for example, and once it's completed, you will be the job will be triggered at that specific time every week, for example, if this is what you chose. Regarding the credential that I mentioned to you earlier, on the runbox, if you don't want to keep the passwords and the username for the SQL login within the runbook script, what you can do is to create credentials on the automation account level. We have here the credentials. You can assign a specific name for the credentials, and all you can do is add the username and the password for the SQL authentication. Now, whenever you run the runbook, either manually or by the job, you will be having on the runbook level, you will have the logs about the when it was executed, was it successful, was it completed, was there any issues with it. I would like to show you, for example, here I have one successful job, and here you can see the output, which was as expected, it was completed, and this is the output of the script of how many indexes were updated and how many statistics were updated as well. You can see here that we have specific tabs for the errors and the warnings. Currently, we don't have anything. For the demo purposes, I executed one to be failed, and as you can see here under the error section, you can see that the credentials was incorrect. So even if you had, while using the Azure Automation account, if you had a failed one, you can come to the logs for the exact runbooks that you are looking for and check the errors, and based on that to take the necessary actions.
So and the end is MySQL agent, right? In this part,
almost
more
yes,
or less for
yes,
a small.
yes, exactly, okay. Yes, but in this part you are using like another resource that is hosted in the Azure to run this for you, but it's acting something similar to the SQL agent for Azure SQL database.
Okay. Okay. Do we have any limitations with this Azure Automation account?
That is a very good question, because one of the known limitations for the runbooks that it cannot be executed for more than 3 hours. So we have seen some similar scenarios with our customers where they have huge databases, and usually the rebuild indexes can take up to more than 3 hours. So in these specific scenarios, I can recommend you to go with the Elastic Jobs, which is something similar, and I will show you an example, but in order to avoid the limitation. So you need to consider that with using Azure Automation that you have some limitation on it, that it needs to be 3 hours or less than that. Otherwise, it will be aborted from the system.
Okay.
Since we were speaking about the Elastic Jobs, this is currently only supported for Azure SQL database, and it's in a preview. So you can expect that there might be some changes after, let's say, this session. So please make sure that you keep an eye on the public documentation in case there was any updates. But basically, the Elastic Jobs relies on a resource called Elastic Elastic Agent. Let me go back to my portal. And as I mentioned, we have here in the Azure portal, we have Elastic Job Agent. And this is basically will be a guideline for you and will help you to create the needed tables as well as the needed store procedure in order to configure a job and run it on your database. Once you try to create an Elastic Job Agent, it will ask you to specify a database that will have these tables and stored procedure. Let me, for example, create a test one. Once, as you can see, the creation process is only asking for you for a name, subscription, and a database. The database that you will be selecting, let me select one of my servers. As you can see here, I can see all my databases. Sometimes, Jose, you might find that some of your databases are not displayed here. The reason for that we have some regulations regarding the service tier. So it needs to be either S0 or above in order to allow it to be as a database assigned with the agent. Let me go back. Mm-hmm.
Yes, no, I would like to mention two things that is very important in this part. The first thing is we saw in customers that using Hyperscale, they have billions of rows. So when they update the statistics and rebuild the indexes, you can imagine how much time is taken, right? So for the reason for this project that you have this billion, I think that one of the recommendations that we used to provide is to use partitioning. Try to create partitions and try to update or to rebuild indexes per partitions, for example, and also for statistics. No, it's one thing that we like. Other point that I would like to ask is right now, Sabrin, you know that I have one database per customer. I have an elastic pool that we have multiple databases with the same structure, but I would like to update the statistics and update indexes, or simply I would like to change something in all these databases. What is the best option for me? It's to use Azure Automation or Elastic Jobs.
Now, as we've seen in the previous example, in the Azure automation, I was mentioning the exact server name and the database name. But in case you would like to apply something on all the databases that under a specific server, the Elastic Job can be an option for you because it can be executed on all the. So for example, you can think of it like you have a store for all the jobs that you want on one database, and you can apply it on all the databases under the same server.
Okay. Yes, because depending on the business, for example, we have different types of customers. Let's say we have customers that they have a small database, another one, they have a big database. So in order to save our money, we choose, for example, for specific with a low number of rows, let's say, or low number of requests, etc. We choose standard 1, standard 2. But for other database, for other customers, that we have more, we need more requests. We used to use, for example, premium or business critical, depending on the customer. For the reason is, I would like to maintain this same savings, but of course, to update the process every time that I need for these databases.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Let me show you this example. This is a previously created Elastic Job agent. And as you can see here, I am connecting it to a database called Job Database. Let me go to that specific database. Now, Jose, whenever you create the agent, you already configured that I want this database to be prepared to have an Elastic Jobs. And as you can see here, these are created manually once you assign the agent with the database. As you can see here, we have some automatically created tables, as well as some automatically created store procedures that will help you in order to configure the job in the next step. Now, once the job, the agent is created, the next step will be is to create the job, create the steps, something similar to what you do with the SQL agent, that once you create the job, you need to add specific steps and then execute it, and etc. In order to create this with the Elastic Job, you can have two possible ways. You can either use T-SQL or you can use PowerShell script. For this demo, I will represent for you the T-SQL method. And I'm loading the same exact example that we have in our public documentation. And let me just walk you through it. Basically, the scripts will be going through, once we completed the agent, the scripts will go through creating the credentials that will assist you in order to access the server that you have selected. And then you will be starting to creating a group that we call it the target group. This is any name that you would like, just to identify the specific group that you have. Once we have the group created, you will be starting adding members to it. And as you can see here, we are using the store procedure that has been created by the agent. So for example, here I am adding a member, and this member is the server that I'm using for this purpose demo. And you can use these specific tables in order to see the already created process. So I have here a target group called server group 1, and I have here the member, which is the server specific server name. Now, once I create this target group and the members, the next step would be creating the actual job that I want to automate. I can start by adding a job, giving the job a specific name to identify it, and then I will add steps. Now you can add as many steps as needed. If you notice, this is exactly similar to the process that you would do while doing a SQL agent job. In this example, for example, I'm adding a step to create a table that called test in case that it was not available in my database. Also, let me show you, while creating this using T-SQL or PowerShell, you will be able to notice the changes on the portal side. For example, here you can see the jobs that I have created. You can see here the target group that I have selected, as well as the credentials that I have created. Something just to highlight that since this is also in preview, this might be changed in the future, but currently, if you want to make any changes, you would need to use one of the method, either the T-SQL or the PowerShell, in order to make the changes. Let me go back here, and once the job is created and I want to automate the process, all I need to do is to execute the store procedure for starting the job, as you can see here. And in case in future, one thing you will notice, for example, I have here a job, I didn't enable the recurrence for it. But if you want, for example, after the creation, you want to update anything, you can use the job update SP in order to update any parameter that you would like to change in future. In order, let's say, once I execute the job, you can monitor it in two ways. You can either use the portal side. On the overview section, you can see that here I have one in process, which the one I have just enabled currently. And I have a few failed attempts, but currently I'm not able to see much information regarding why this was failed. In order to see more information regarding the failure, I can go back to the T-SQL section, and on the table job execution, you would be able to see a column, and this is actually include more information from the portal side. So that's why I would recommend you, if you want to monitor it, to check it from the T-SQL side. You can see the life cycle of it, if it's failed, what is it's waiting for. And also here, since we have a failed records, you can see in the last message column that this was failing due to an issue that was within the credential. So in order to have more information, if you had an Elastic job and it was failing, you can check this section, and this should give you more information about why it was failing. Now, this is in terms of Azure SQL, Azure Automation and Elastic jobs. And as you mentioned earlier, we have the SQL agent for Azure SQL managed instance available. So as you can see here, I have a connection to one of my managed instance. And you would be able to see the agent. This is something similar to the on-premise way. You can create a job to rebuild the indexes and add these steps to it. So basically, this is the same way we would use in the on-premise part. So if you are using an Azure SQL managed instance, you can use this option because it will be avoiding, let's say, using extra resources on your portal. But the one thing I would like just to highlight, and it's very important, that in the Azure SQL, we need to make sure that, since we are speaking in terms of performance, we need to make sure that we have a job configured, either using any types of the solutions that we have represented to update the indexes as well as the statistics.
Okay. So you know that right now, Sabrin, for me right now, after this year, we fight a lot to implement everything, to run everything. Right now, we need more information about monitoring. No? What is the different tools that we have? Right now, I would like to know basically what is the main options that we could use in order to review these sorts of things in terms of monitoring how my application is working on, the database, etc.
So in terms of monitoring, you can use multiple options. And let me start by just representing for you the available options as well as the supportability for these options and solutions for Azure SQL Database as well as managed instance. As you represented earlier, we have the query performance insight only for Azure SQL Database. You can use DMVs, you can use Query Store, as well as SQL Insight and Azure Monitor. I would like to represent a couple of solutions for you in the next slides. And For example, as we've seen with you at the beginning of the session with the Azure portal, that we have the matrices available for Azure SQL database and Azure SQL managed instance. So if you prefer to use the portal method, you can go to the matrices sections, and based on the selections and the filtering, you can see what was the performance of your database. Also, the query performance insights and the performance recommendations for Azure SQL database can give you more as, let's say, monitoring information. But what I would like to show you further is in terms of query store. Now, the query store for the Azure SQL DB and managed instance are enabled by default. And why I would like to recommend you to use the query store, because it will have all the events, all the queries. It will capture everything for you that has occurred on your database. Usually, whenever we have like a case with our customers, we recommend them to check the query store to identify what was happening with the performance of the database, and also just to highlight and isolate the issue to understand which specific query or which specific job was causing the problem. Let me go back to my database. Let me close this one just. So I have here a database called data driven right here. And as you can see here, we have the query store. Now, this is the same process for the Azure SQL.
I think we lost Sabrin.
Yes, we lost Sabrin, yes. Okay, so let me.
She's
Okay,
back.
Sabrin. Okay.
Can you hear
she's
me?
back. Yes.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Okay, so let me go back to the part. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So let me go back to the part regarding the query store. So as you can see here, we have multiple views that you can use within the query store. And this is by default enabled for the Azure SQL database. You can use one of these in order to identify the issue. Let's assume that I have a problem with high CPU on my database, and I would like to identify which query is causing it. For example, in this specific scenario, you can use the top resource consuming queries. If you right-click on it and try to view it, for example, here you have the configure option, and depending on what part you would like to troubleshoot, or let's say which part you would like to check, you can customize this depending on the time, depending on the resources. For example, I would like to check in terms of CPU, since I have a problem with the CPU. And let's assume that I had the problem yesterday between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m., for example. And you can change it between your local time, UTC time. So it's very customized. You can, depending on what information you would like to see. And once you hit OK, it will show you the top consuming the query in terms of CPU. And if you highlight on it, you can get the query ID, you can get the query text from here. If you click on this part, you would be able to see the query text. Also, it will show you the execution plan if there was any warnings that was occurring at that part. Also, here you can see the plan if there was any changes on the plans. And based on that, you can take further to identify which query that was causing the high CPU, and based on that to take the tuning actions on that. Another scenario that we might face is in case I have a performance issue in general, I am not able to identify what is happening on the database. And I want to see if it's causing by the CPU, if it's causing by parallelism, if it's caused by I/O. In this part, I would recommend to use query weight statistics. Let me open this one. And you have the same option. Let me configure this part and let me specify the problem time. One second. Okay, as you can see here, I just double check the timing. Okay, as you can see here, you will have all the weight types that were occurring during the specified time range that I have selected. And as you can see here, you have the top weight was for CPU. So for this reason, while using the weight statistics, you can identify which part was slowing the performance of your database. Also, if you click on it, it can give you the queries, and you would be able to see here if there was any changes on the plans, if it was canceled by the customer, for example, right here, as we can see, or it was completed. We can see here also the warnings. Something just to highlight that in case you have multiple plans and we have noticed that for some reason the plan that was chosen is not the best plan, you can always consider forcing the plan. And also, as shown previously by Jose, the forcing for the plan can also be done by the automatic tuning. And let's say that one of the DBAs has forced a plan or it was done by the automatic tuning. You can come to the queries with force plan in order to see which plans were forced. And you can anytime unforce it as well.
It's very important because for me, to be honest with you, I like the weight stats because at the end, weight stats for give an insight, about it. So, but for example, load rate governor is other things that is very important in the weight stats. Not to mention that it's about the limitation that we have in terms of let's say bandwidth that we have with a transaction log, right? So, but yes, for me, at least, Sabrin, for me, I like it the way to start more than other queries, but you know what.
I know you prefer it.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so moving on to the next possible way to monitor what was happening on the database. Now we have multiple ways, but I would like to highlight for you the ways that are available specifically for the Azure SQL. One of the ways is using the audits. One of the common questions we get working daily with customers that I want to know what happened on my databases. For example, I have some deleted records. Who has deleted it for me? So, for example, for security perspective. Now, the auditing is enabled or available for both Azure SQL database as well as managed instance, and it helps you to track everything that has occurred on your Azure SQL side. Let me show you on my end. Let me start with the Azure SQL database. I have here an Azure SQL database. This is the managed instance. Here. So I'm going to this specific server, and for the auditing, you can enable it from the auditing plate, but you have both options. You can enable it either on the SQL level side or you can enable it on the database side. But we usually recommend our customers to go with the SQL server side for one reason, that if you created any new databases, it will be already included. And if you configure it on the server level, it will be inherited to all the databases under that specific server. So for this reason, I will be configuring it on the SQL server level. And all we need to do is just to enable the option. And as you can see here, we have 3 destinations that we can select to store these events. You can either use a storage account, you can use log analytics, event hub. Now for Azure SQL database, I will walk you through the storage part, but later on with the managed instance, I will walk you through as well the log analytics. Now, for example, in this, I have chosen one of the storage accounts that I have. And one thing that you can also configure while doing the enabling the audit is how long you want to keep the audit logs available. Now, by default, this is specified as 0, which means that you don't have any retentions, that the logs will be kept available for you on the storage account for, let's say, without any retentions. For example, if you change it to 30 days, it means that the storage account will hold for you the last 30 days. Anything longer than that, it will be automatically deleted. Now, once this is enabled, let me go to my database that I was checking. Let me just close these ones. So for example, I have this database. And I have one table called data driven. And I have basically random data within it. And let me try to delete some records of it. Now, if I try to delete any records from it, everything will be, or any actions I'm doing on the database, like such as logins, deletes, any type of scripts, it will be all stored within the storage account. Now, we can access the storage accounts directly from the portal side. Let me go to mine. It's this one. And here I will have the containers, and you will have a specific one for the SQL audits. Now, this is automatically created for you. There is no need to go to the storage account and create a specific container. Once you enable the audit, it's automatically created for you on the container level. Now, if I access it, and since we specified the auditing on the server level, you will notice that I have a folder for each and every specific database I have under this server. Let me go to this specific database, and I can basically see that it's organized by date. So for every and each day, you will be having a separate folder. The same day can have multiple files depending on the size of the transaction, or let's say the events that were occurring on that part.
So at the end, that means that we could have like a SQL profiler.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Let me show you, for example, here on the 26th, I have this file. Let's say that an issue was reported on the 26th that there was a deleted data, and I would like to know who has deleted it. Now you can go directly to the storage account and download it and use SSMS in order to read it. Or you can basically copy the URL that you have here and use this specific T-SQL in order to read it. Let me just remove it to show everyone. So we can use this T-SQL in order to read the file. And all I need is to add the URL for the file. And you will notice here you have something similar to the extended events, to the SQL profiler. You will have a lot of information about what was happening on your database, the incoming connections, the statements, like the queries were executed on your database. And what I like in this specific way, Jose, that you can treat it like any normal T-SQL. That if, for example, rather than just scrolling between the records that I have, I can easily work through it as a normal T-SQL. I can filter on the statements that have delete statements, and I can make any ordering for it. For example, here you can see that it gave you which user has deleted the information, as well as it's giving you the exact delete script.
Okay. No, and the end is is the option that we have, because you know that right now we have other ways also to capture the SQL profiler, because I know that is deprecated, but using the extended events, we could have right now at least what happened using Azure Data Studio or using SQL Server Management Studio extended events in managed instance. We could, let's say, to capture what happened in database, to know the duration, what happened. Of course, that auditing is when we are not capturing. So this data. But at the end, it's the tool that I think that many people and many developers miss this option. And right now, many time ago, right now we could do it. No, we could do it in order to determine this information. Yeah.
Exactly. I would like to show you the same thing on a managed instance.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go to my managed database. And as I mentioned, the auditing is available for Azure SQL database as well as for the managed instance, but there are some differences within the setup process for them. So for example, for the managed instance, I would be accessing a plate called diagnostic setting. And here I will be configuring the diagnostic settings to direct the events either to a storage account or for Event Hub or a log analytics. So here, for example, I have already configured a diagnostic settings. I am enabling to capture all the logs, all the audits, and this time I chose the log analytics as a destination for my my events. For example, let me show you what is the differences in terms of between a managed instance and an Azure SQL setup. The first one is related to the diagnostic setting used. And the second one would be that on the managed instance, we would need to consider, let's say, configure the audits as well as the audit specification. So in order to complete the process and capture these events and also as well direct them to the log analytics, I would need to create an audit and direct it to the external monitor because in this part, I'm using log analytics that is hosted in the Azure. Also, I'm adding an audit specification. And as you can notice, within the specifications, I am adding which part I would like to, let's say, capture within my events. And this is totally up to you what type of events you would like to add. And based on, let's say, your security needs, your business needs, you can configure this. Once it's enabled, let's say created, you can as well enable it. And the audit capture will be started at your side. For example, here I have a few insert statements. Let me just change it from the master. I can insert the records. Once these records are inserted, and since we use the logs, I would be going back to, let me just copy this. I would be going back to my managed instance. And basically, you have two ways in order to read these logs. You can go from the managed instance to the logs section, or you can search for the log analytics and access the logs analytics directly. So you have two possible ways. It's up to you which way you prefer. Let me go from the managed instance on the logs. And right here, you will be able to see the tables that are available within the log analytics for Azure SQL Managed Instance. We have the Azure Activity, we have the diagnostics, we have the matrices. And querying this part, it would be similar to the Kusto query. If I try to run this and use the Azure Diagnostic table, I would be able to see all the activities that were happening on my own managed instance. And as you can notice, this is very similar to the part that we checked with the audit logs. Now, in terms of customizing the view of this part, you can use the project in order to filter upon the records that you would like to see. If there is any filtration regarding the statements, for example, here I would like to see any changes that were made on this specific table, users. And you can see here that, for example, we were inserting the records on that part. As you can see here, I'm selecting the last 24 hours. You can customize it or you can change the filter depending on how much data you would like, or you can even add it within the query itself, a time range.
One question that we have right now in the chat is from Alberto. Mentioned that in Azure SQL Server, using the function, it's possible to specify a start more than the name of the file. To be honest with you, I don't know. It's possible to use a start, just only the start.
Let me
yeah.
Let me show you a way that I
Yes.
usually use if I have multiple files. You can go from the SSMS, you can go to open, and you have the option to merge audit files. So basically you can go here, add the files, and connect to the blob storage that you have, and just overload the files that you have, and you can merge them, and you will be dealing with it like similar way while you are reading the events from the extended events.
Okay, so and the end you
I'm not sure about
the
this star, but you can use this part if you have like multiple files for the specific day. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let me go back to the slides. So next, since we were discussing about the auditing, about the query stores, and let's say how you can monitor the database, sometimes it could be helpful as well just to be notified in case we have an issue on the database end. We have the option to use alerts for Azure SQL database and Azure SQL managed instance. Let's assume, for example, the DBAs would like to be notified if let's say my database has reached 80% of the CPU. I would like to be notified before any issues has been happening. I would like to take like let's say proactive actions on that. Let me go back to my Azure portal. And this is, as I mentioned, this is available for managed instance as well as SQL DB. I can go to my database. Let me access the database, the server. And if I go to the database, you have here a plate called alerts. And you can create the alerts based on what information you would like to be alerted for. We have a lot of events, and you can, these are the common ones, but you can check all the, let's say, the available matrices, and based on that to create the alerts. Since our example was related to the CPU, I will choose this one. And I would like to be alerted if the CPU has reached greater than 80%. One thing I would like to mention that you can combine conditions. There is no need to create like 3 alerts if you would like to be alerted for 3 events. You can combine all the conditions within the same alert. Once you set the conditions on what actions you would like to be alerted for, you would be moving next to select the actions, which are who are the people that you would like to be alerted. You will be creating a group to identify these, let's say, these people that will be alerted. And within the notification, I would like to show you something. You can specify that I want a specific role to be notified. For example, like I want to notify the owners. I want to notify the monitoring contributors. Or you can specify a specific email, SSMS, mobile notification, or voice. For example, we have seen this with our customers that they have a specific email alias for the DBA's team, and you can specify this specific email, and based on that, an email will be sent if you reach more than the thresholds that you have specified in the alert.
Just only one question in this alert. So suppose that I need to increase. I saw the CPU is very high. I could implement something this alert that to do something. For example, increase the number of vCores automatically or something like this.
Now, currently, it needs to be alerted. So it's basically will give you the option, and you can take the action based on that.
Okay. So I could do actions. Okay. Okay. Well, in terms of disaster recovery, I know that much probably we don't have too much time, Sabrin, but basically I think that we could cover the main 3 things that we have, right? About the disaster recovery, not?
Exactly. Now, in terms of disaster recovery, We all, let's say, most of our customers are concerned about the high availability for their databases, and they would like to have options in order to increase the high availability for them. Now, the options that are available, and it depends on the resource type that you are using. For example, you can consider using zone redundant, you can consider using active georeplication or failover groups. For example, the zone redundant is a way that can help you in case a specific issue has occurred within the data center. So within the region itself, some of the regions we have that have multiple availability zones. And basically, whenever you enable this part, you would be able to have a copy in one of the available zones. Now, this is available for premium and business critical service tier without any extra cost, but it's also available for general purpose, but there's an extra cost since it's in preview. Now, this gives you more resilient for the application, as well as it will provide you, let's say, with high availability in case, for example, we had a power issue in a specific zone, it can help you. Something you need to consider that this is not available on all the regions because not all the regions have multiple zones. So you need to take into consideration this.
So see, if I understood correctly, when I have my business critical environment or I have my a premium database, if I have 3 copies of my data and I enable these options, every replica is going to be in another zones, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And enabling the process is very straightforward. So let me show, for example, go to one of the business critical databases that I have. Okay, for example, this one. If you go to the compute storage, you would be able to see that you have an option here to activate the zone redundant. You can set it to any time as yes, and you can revert it back. Once you configure this, then you will have it available.
Okay, so that's mean that I'm going to have the replicas. Most probably the latency could be increased a little bit because depending of the zones, depending of the location, but
Of
at the
course,
end, if
yes.
something happen in one zone, let's say automatically in terms of high-ability is going to have another place. Okay, perfect.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Now, let's say assume that you want something that is in case an issue has occurred on the region level. In this part, you can use the active georeplication, but I would like to highlight that this is only available for Azure SQL database, and it's currently available for all the service tiers. It's available on all the regions. Basically, the active georeplication is having a secondary database on the same region or another region. You will have a synchronic replication. You can have up to 4 secondaries, and you can build like a chain for it. For example, as you can see here in this graph, the primary has a secondary, but the secondary itself also is activated with other active georeplication. And this can help you as well to offload the select statements to the read replica. So this is also an option can be considered specifically for the customers that would like to keep the replicas within the same region. So, for example, we will be talking next about the failover groups. The failover groups restrict you that you need to be having the groups in another region. But for the active georeplication, you can have it within the region.
2 questions. What happened? I need to pay for the secondary, or is include? I need to pay or not?
Yes, yes.
Do I need? Yes.
Because it will be, it's not like, let's say, the build and replicas that you have within the Azure. You would be creating another SQL server, and you will be creating the connection between them. So you will be built for the resource itself as well as the storage for that resource.
Okay. So in this case, for example, could I change the database tier of the secondary? For example, let's say have primary, I don't know, business critical with 4 vCores, another one with less vCore or more vCores? Because depend.
Now you can change it, but it's highly recommended to make sure that both of the databases are on the same service tier. The reason for that is to make sure that the asynchronous process between them are up to date. For example, let's assume that you have a very let's say, high power compute on the primary one, but you have less on the secondary. The secondary will have some problems trying to catch up with the primary. So in this case, you might have more latency. That's why we always recommend the customers to make sure that we have the same service tier on both.
Okay.
Moving next, we have the failover groups, which is basically an abstraction about the geo-replication. This is available for both Azure SQL database as well as managed instance. You can have one or many failover groups. Now, something to consider that all the databases that are within the same group are acted like a unit. So for example, if you want to fail over one of the groups, all of the databases within that group will be failing over together. Now, this can be automatically happen depending on the failover policy that you have specified on your database, and also depending on the grace period. By grace period, we mean what is, let's say, the time that is expected for the region to not be available within your policy to automatically fair to the secondary part.
So if I understood correctly, right now, geo-replication just only it's asynchronous. It's just only for reading data. If something happen, I need to change the connection string to get access to the geo-replica. But in failover groups, is different. It's the typical failover groups that we have in on-premise.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Okay.
And if you have the failover configured, make sure that you are using within the connection string, you are using the failover group name. The reason for that you don't have to worry about if there was a failover happening, you don't have to worry about the, let's say, changing the connection string to direct you from the primary to the secondary. Whenever you specify the failover group name, the listener automatically would direct you to the primary one. And also, for example, for the read-only transactions, you can specify the failover group with the secondary in order to direct for the listener to direct you to the secondary one. Okay. So you won't have to, let's say, worry about changing the connection string if you have any failovers occurring.
Okay. So other question that I have: what in SQL on premises, when I specified application intent equal read-only, I think that is going to point to the secondary. So what happened if I specify the connection string, the failover, the listener, the failover group name.database.windows.net, and I specified application intents equal read-only? What is going to point to the secondary server, or what will be happening in this situation? Sorry.
Okay. So if you use the application intent, it will direct you to one of the built-in replicas for your specific database. So it will not direct you to the secondary for the failover group. If you want to go to the secondary for the failover group, you would be needing to use the secondary within the connection string.
So if I understood correctly, when I have business critical and I have failover group, beside that, I could connect to the secondary. If I modify the application intent equal read-only in the primary, I'm going to point to the read scale, to the replica.
Exactly.
Okay, so I have 3 or 4 copies more of the data in order for my application, right?
Exactly. And you will be charged only for the databases within the failover group, not within the read scale out replicas.
Okay.
So this is in terms of disaster recovery and the solutions that you can consider using for your Azure SQL.
Okay. Yes, the last question I have, thank you so much for everything that we have, because it's a lot of information. In terms of cost, you know that we have groups of developers that is using Azure SQL DB, but they are not working during for example, during the weekends. But it's the cost is a little bit expensive for me. And also we have a managed instance that I need to maintain the managed instance. So do you have any option that you could recommend in order to, let's say, to avoid this type of cost?
Yeah, of course. And this is a very valid question and a very, let's say, common questions that we receive, especially for the, as you mentioned, for the databases that don't need to be available or, let's say, online 24/7. For this, we have two options, one for the Azure SQL database and the other one for the managed instance. For the Azure SQL database, we have the serverless compute tier. And for the managed instance, we have the start stop, which is a new feature that was represented within the wave feature that we had in 2022. Now, basically for the serverless Azure SQL database, it's a compute that is available for general purpose currently, and it's also available for the hyperscale, but it's under preview. What will occur for your database if you are using the serverless as a compute tier? For example, if you don't have any CPU usage or if you don't have any logins coming to your database will be paused after the auto delay value that you have specified. So you can specify within the configuration, and I will show you later on my portal, that after 1 hour, if I don't have any CPU, if I don't have any logins, pause my database. And during the pause time, as you can see here on the screen, you will be only charged for the storage. You will not be charged for any compute resources. Now, once you want to connect to the database, all you need to do is just to send a login to the database. Now, just something to highlight that with serverless database, the first login is expected to fail because it will be kicking off the resume for your Azure SQL database. But the next one, it will be coming through the database since it will be online and resumed. Let me show you further on my database side. So on this, yeah.
I just want to ask you if you want to continue, because I feel like people here want to continue like 2 hours, but it's up to you. We are over time. I can
think
stay.
we have 2 slides left only. It's up to you.
No, I can stay, and I see by the question that people can stay 2 more hours even. So it's up to you. Just tell me, do I need to stop you or we continue? That's okay. We can continue if you want.
Right now the owner is Sabrin. Sabrin, whatever you want. So
I am okay with it. If everyone is okay with it.
The most important thing, basically, Sabrin, is to summarize the serverless. Beside that, that we could use as a dynamic way, the number of CPUs, Sabrin. Other option that we have is, for example, that when I don't remember, but when there is not any connections against the database, much probably we could see in the portal the SQL, the database is going to be paused, not in this part, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And as you can see here on the screen, I have it for a general purpose. You can see it here. It's available. Now, it's available also for hyperscale, but you will need to agree on the preview term since it's currently in preview for the hyperscale. And just wanted to highlight for you, whenever you are using serverless, you will be asked to specify the maximum and the minimum vCore, which will be the limits for your usage for the vCores. So for example, if you have less workload, your database will be using 1 vCore, and the limit for your, let's say, usage, for example, you had let's say high workload, it would be 8 vCores. Now, in terms of number of vCores, I would like to show you a matrix that you can use. For example, here you have the CPU used. And let me just go to last 3 days. And you can see here, let me just select. you can see the number of vCores that has been used. I have another example. It was for a specific time. Now, currently, we are looking at the average, right? So you need to consider having the aggregation. But when I change it to the max, you can see that in a specific time, I was having 8 vCore. And if you check the same time within the overview, you would notice that during that specific time, I had a high CPU usage on my database. And it reached the limit for the minimum vCores that I have, let's say maximum vCores that I have specified. Now, this is in terms of serverless for Azure SQL database, and you can consider using serverless or provision depending on a very, let's say, criterias. And I wanted to share with you this table that can help you to decide if the serverless is a good option for you or you need to consider not using it for your business. For the managed instance, we have something similar, and it was newly, let's say, represented within the wave feature that we have for the managed instance in 2022, which is basically the start and stop. So currently, for specific regions, we have the option enabled to start or stop the managed instance, and you can schedule it as well. Let me show you on a managed instance that I have. So for example, I have here a managed instance that is hosted in West Europe, which is one of the supported regions. Now we are aiming to cover more regions, but currently I would recommend you just to check what are the regions that are supported for this. You can see here on the overview plate, I have the stop and start options. I can stop the managed instance whenever I don't have, like, say, a workload on it. Just to highlight, the process to stop it might take up to 5 minutes, but the process to start the managed instance might take 20 minutes. The reason for this, I wanted to share with you that if you want to have like a specific scheduling for the start and stop, take into consideration that it might take up to 20 minutes to be started in case you have any automated jobs or if you have any expected workload coming to your managed instance. Now, whenever your managed instance is enrolled within the wave feature, you can see here under the start stop schedule, you can select the time zone that you prefer, and based on that, you create a schedule. For example, I would like during the weekend, I would like to stop my managed instance since there is no expected workload. So I can start it, for example, from 6 p.m. and I wanted to resume on, let's say, Monday morning at, let's say, 8 a.m. This way, your managed instance will be stopped during the weekend and you will not be charged for the, let's say, the usage. You will be only charged for the storage. And finally, at the end, I wanted to share with you some of the, let's say, like a criteria how you can decide what is the, let's say, best option for, what is the best, let's say, Azure resource for your own business. So you can use this graph in order to consider if you want to go with IaaS, if you want to go with Azure SQL Managed Instance or SQL Database. And also, you can use the information that we have represented for you today as well to take this and take, let's say, your, let's say, migrations, your workload further as well. I have a question from Bala regarding how we can enable it. I will share with you, Bala, a blog article that can help you to identify which are the regions that are supported, as well as how you can enroll your managed instance.
Yes, other question that we have for Brad is how to, I'm writing right now, we'll take that. Usually, how we are going to wake up the database? Well, basically, when you establish the connection, the first connections, if out of the database is paused, this first connection is going to, let's say, wake up the database. Not, but in this situation, as we have in on-premises with the option auto pause, a SQL Server needs to bring the data to read the files, embed the files, etc. And read the data for the storage to the memory, depending on the workload that you have. So at the end, yes, the first connection will take more time for the reason it's needed to implement and retry logic in this part.
The solution that we are using is simply to have another job that send 1 minute before it a simple query. It wake up the Azure database, and that's it.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes, you are right. Yes, yep. The most important thing here with the serverless, at least Sabrin, if you agree with me, is the dynamic way that you have to increase the number of vCores, okay? Because on the end, you pay for the CPU that you are using. Also, using hyperscale with serverless, we have the combination about hyperscale with a huge amount of storage, plus this way to increase or to use more or less CPU depending on what is demanding of workload. No. Also, you are going to pay for this for the number of CPU. It's very complex the formula, to be honest with you, no, Sabrin, because so it's complex the formula, but it's using about the CPU, etc. But it's a good choice for developers, for testing. Also, when you are not using the database in order to reduce the cost. Of course, that other databases like Premium, etc., you could scale up, scale down the database depending on your needs, depending on the business. For example, we have several options, an automatic process to scale up, scale down when you are not using the business of business hours. No?
Okay, I think that we all agree that it was an awesome session.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's not the first time that we host Joss, and we love it. And Sabrin, again, it's a great session. I will use this opportunity to invite you both to speak in the Future Data Driven Summit 2023 as well. We just opened the call for speaker, and I'm waiting to see you there as well. We love to see sessions like this, and I invite everyone here to register to the conference. I will add a link to the chat right now, and with this we will close the session, and thanks to everyone that joined us.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this session. And the end, as we mentioned, is the experience that we have in support. So we see the bad thing, not Sabrin, the bad thing and the good thing of the product.
Yeah, exactly.
So the most important thing is to share the experience, no, and try to get the most and reducing the cost is the intention.
Exactly. It was more like sharing our experience with our customers. Yeah.
Yeah, the amount of questions, the discussion, tell everything. This tell that it was awesome session. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
And don't forget to register. We really want to see you speaking in the conference.
Well, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity,
Thank you so much.
Ronit. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone.